It all began quietly, almost like the universe itself was holding its breath. People around the world noticed strange things in the sky, small, unusual lights that moved in ways that no airplane or satellite ever could. At first, it was easy to dismiss these sightings. Some thought it was a reflection, a meteor, or just a trick of the eyes. But soon, the lights became too precise, too deliberate to ignore. Scientists in observatories began noticing patterns. Amateur stargazers reported formations that seemed to change overnight. Something was watching Earth, and nobody knew why. Governments tried to calm their citizens. News reports appeared everywhere, explaining that it could be natural phenomena or experimental aircraft. But the truth was far stranger. Satellites sent into orbit began picking up signals, strange, coded transmissions that human computers could not decode. The signals were not aggressive, but they were precise, deliberate, and clearly intelligent. The idea that Earth was being observed by beings from somewhere else, something far beyond human technology, started spreading like wildfire. Fear began to mix with curiosity. In universities and research labs, people worked day and night trying to understand what was happening. Students stared at screens, decoding sequences that seemed almost alive, patterns that shifted too quickly for any human mind to fully grasp. Engineers began analyzing the signals, attempting to trace them back to a source. They found faint energy bursts coming from deep space, precise enough to suggest a deliberate effort to communicate, or maybe just to watch. Humanity had never experienced anything like this. Ordinary people were also affected. Parents pointed to the sky at night, trying to explain to their children what was happening, but often they had no explanation themselves. Communities gathered in backyards and parks, looking up together. There was a sense of awe mixed with unease. Some people reported feeling watched, as though invisible eyes were following every movement. Others laughed it off, calling it a global imagination or mass hysteria. But the scientists knew better. The patterns were too complex, too consistent, too precise to be random. Something intelligent was out there, studying them. What humanity did not know at that moment was that the galaxy, far beyond Earth, was watching. To alien species, humans seemed like tiny, insignificant creatures on a small blue planet, barely worth noticing. They assumed humans were primitive, easy to control, and far from being a threat. Most of these species had technology that allowed them to travel between stars with ease, to communicate across light years, and to monitor planets without ever being noticed. They looked at Earth as a curiosity, like one might observe ants through a magnifying glass. No one expected humans to rise beyond their perceived limitations. At first, the aliens didn't make themselves known. They sent probes, some visible, some invisible, and watched how humans reacted. How would they respond? Would they panic? Would they fight back? Most species in the galaxy expected that humans, like many other species they had observed, would crumble under pressure. They assumed humans were fragile and predictable, unable to coordinate on a planetary scale. But they underestimated something fundamental about humans: resilience, creativity, and the ability to unite in the face of unknown danger. Meanwhile, on Earth, life continued in a strange rhythm of fear and curiosity. People worked their usual jobs, but spent evenings and nights staring at the sky. Children grew fascinated with the lights, imagining stories about who or what could be up there. Teachers tried to explain the unusual phenomena with logic, but logic could only go so far when the evidence seemed to defy everything humans knew about the universe. News outlets began to report sightings more frequently. Some videos went viral, showing lights moving with impossible precision, changing direction instantly, and disappearing without a trace. Amid this growing awareness, governments finally admitted that something unusual was happening in Earth's orbit. Scientists were given unprecedented access to classified data. Teams of engineers, physicists, and codebreakers were assembled to study the signals and patterns. Late nights turned into early mornings as humanity tried to make sense of what was coming. For many, it was the first time they felt a real, collective fear of something beyond their world. But alongside that fear, a spark of determination began to grow. Humans had faced challenges before: natural disasters, wars, pandemics, and each time they had found ways to adapt, survive, and sometimes even thrive. For the first time, humans began to realize that they were not alone in the universe. It was no longer science fiction, no longer stories on screens and in books. This was real, tangible, and utterly extraordinary. Families sat together, staring at the sky, discussing what might happen if these visitors were not friendly. Cities experienced blackouts, not from the aliens, but from the collective nervousness of people double-checking infrastructure, worried about possible interference. In quiet homes, individuals tinkered with radios, computers, and satellites, trying to find ways to understand the strange signals. Every attempt brought more questions than answers. The galaxy, meanwhile, watched with amusement. These humans were like a small fire burning on a damp hill. Interesting, but unlikely to spread. They were tiny, fragile, and completely predictable, or so it seemed. They didn't realize that this tiny fire had the potential to grow into something much larger, something no species in the galaxy could have imagined. That potential was invisible at first, buried under layers of fear, doubt, and inexperience. But it existed. The first part of humanity's story was simple: observation, confusion, and curiosity. People didn't know what they were facing, and neither did the aliens fully understand the strength of the human spirit. Streets were filled with discussions, classrooms were filled with debates, and newsrooms were flooded with reports of sightings. Scientists argued about the signals' meanings. Engineers speculated about the technology that could produce them. Ordinary people shared stories of lights in the sky, strange noises, and fleeting glimpses of objects moving too fast for conventional understanding. What made this moment truly extraordinary, however, was how quietly humanity began to change. There was no loud announcement, no global declaration of war or peace. It was small gestures at first: neighbors helping neighbors, communities sharing knowledge, scientists collaborating across borders. The fear of the unknown began to fuel curiosity and creativity. Humans started thinking, in ways they had never done before, about how to protect themselves, how to communicate, and how to prepare for a future that suddenly seemed much larger than the small planet they called home. By the end of the first phase, the galaxy still assumed humans were simple, limited, and fragile. They watched, expecting panic, chaos, and surrender. What they didn't know was that humanity was already quietly taking its first steps toward resilience. People were learning, adapting, and noticing patterns. Small inventions were being tested in garages and labs. Teams of researchers communicated in code. Children asked questions that led adults to rethink assumptions. And somewhere, deep within, the human spirit, a determination began to grow. Humanity would not be an easy target. It was a quiet revolution, invisible to the rest of the galaxy. But the signs were there, subtle and small, in acts of courage, curiosity, and innovation. The first phase of humanity's encounter with the unknown ended with more questions than answers, but it also ended with a sense of hope. Humans had been observed, underestimated, and tested without knowing it. And even though they didn't yet realize it, the lessons of this period would prepare them for something no species in the galaxy would ever forget. By the time the first full year of strange lights, signals, and unexplained phenomena passed, humans were beginning to change in ways that were hard to measure. Communities had started to think collectively. Scientists collaborated across borders, and engineers improvised in ways that were becoming more sophisticated every day. People had begun to understand that while the galaxy might see them as small, fragile, and unimportant, they had something no other species could predict: human determination, creativity, and the refusal to be controlled. This was just the beginning. Humanity had been observed, underestimated, and quietly tested. But in their fear, curiosity, and cooperation, the first seeds of something extraordinary were planted. They were about to show the galaxy that even the smallest species could teach the universe a lesson that would be remembered forever. The strange lights and unexplained signals in the sky had already begun to change life on Earth. People had grown used to watching the night sky with a mix of fear and curiosity, but no one was fully prepared for what came next. Far beyond Earth, in a place humans could not imagine, the galaxy's leaders had begun to meet in secret. These were not nations like on Earth, but massive civilizations that controlled hundreds of planets, each with advanced technology and incredible knowledge. To them, humans seemed like tiny insects, struggling on a small rock floating in space. They did not yet see the strength hidden in human hearts. The council convened in a large chamber aboard a ship so enormous that it could contain entire cities inside. Beings of every imaginable shape and form floated or hovered, communicating without words, projecting thoughts and images directly into the minds of others. Their voices were calm but firm. They had been observing Earth for a long time, quietly studying humanity's growth, learning about its achievements and weaknesses. And now they had made a decision. The council agreed that humanity was too unpredictable to be left unchecked. One member argued that humans could never challenge them, that they were too primitive, too limited to pose a real threat. Another member, older and wiser, warned that underestimating any species could be dangerous. But the majority dismissed the caution, seeing humans as a minor annoyance rather than a potential rival. After hours of debate, they concluded, Earth must be controlled, its people guided, and its technology restricted. In other words, the galaxy decided that humans were not to be allowed the freedom they had enjoyed for millennia. With that decision made, alien fleets began moving into positions near Earth. Their ships were unlike anything humans had ever seen, enormous vessels that glowed with energy and moved silently across the void. To people on Earth, they first appeared as distant, massive lights hovering in orbit, almost like stars gone wrong. Governments around the world scrambled to respond. Military leaders tracked the approaching ships with radar and satellites, but they could not identify what they were, how they moved, or how advanced their technology might be. Panic began to rise quietly beneath the surface. For ordinary people, the arrival of the alien fleets was both terrifying and mesmerizing. Children pressed their faces against windows, staring at the sky, while parents tried to explain what was happening without admitting just how powerless humans really were. Some people prayed, others cried, and some simply watched in awe. The lights moved in formations that were impossibly perfect, patterns that no human mind could replicate. They could appear instantly over one continent and vanish over another, as if Earth itself was a chessboard for the galaxy's testing. Despite the fear, something unexpected began to happen among humans. Communities began to come together in ways they had not for decades. People shared knowledge, resources, and skills, realizing that this was not a problem any one person, city, or country could face alone. Scientists held emergency meetings, communicating across borders in real time, sharing findings and theories about the alien ships. Engineers analyzed military technology, trying to adapt it, improve it, and find weaknesses. Ordinary citizens began volunteering to help wherever they could, from building communication networks to assisting in scientific experiments. The aliens, watching silently from orbit, were still confident. They assumed humans' actions would be slow, chaotic, and disorganized. They expected panic, riots, and despair, not the growing unity and cooperation that was beginning to spread like a quiet flame across the planet. They had underestimated the human instinct to survive and adapt, the ability to work together when faced with an unknown and terrifying challenge. Communication from the alien ships was minimal at first. Beams of light, strange pulses, and signals were sent down to Earth, warning humans to obey, to cease developing certain technologies, and to comply with the new restrictions. Governments attempted to respond, but messages could not be decoded fully. It was clear, however, that the aliens expected humans to follow instructions without question. They assumed compliance would be automatic because of humanity's perceived weakness. But humans were not so easily controlled. Even as fear spread, curiosity and courage were growing stronger. Scientists found subtle patterns in the aliens' signals, hints of vulnerability that suggested the ships were not invincible. Engineers began experimenting, creating small devices and simulations to test ideas about communication, defense, and control. Ordinary people, too, became part of the effort, scanning the skies, documenting movements, and sharing data with global networks. For the first time in history, the world was quietly united against a threat that no one could fully understand. The psychological impact was enormous. People who had never considered themselves brave or capable found themselves acting with courage. Children in schools learned about teamwork, observation, and logic in ways that became practical almost overnight. Adults who had once been focused on personal lives now thought about collective survival. Families had long discussions about the future, about what could be done to protect the planet, and about the responsibility of humanity to act as one species. Fear had become a catalyst for growth, not destruction. Meanwhile, the Alien Council grew frustrated. Their initial plans were simple: issue commands, enforce compliance, and watch humans bend to their will. But they discovered that humans were not predictable. Instead of panicking, they were organizing. Instead of hiding, they were observing. Instead of despairing, they were experimenting. The Council had not accounted for the uniquely human combination of creativity, stubbornness, and collaboration. It was a flaw in their assumptions, one that could change everything. Some humans began building underground facilities, creating safe spaces to experiment with new technologies and strategies. Communication lines were secretly expanded, so scientists in one country could share discoveries instantly with those on the other side of the world. Engineers modified drones, satellites, and even civilian technology, finding ways to test human ingenuity without alerting the aliens. Ordinary citizens contributed by gathering materials, running simulations, or simply keeping watch. Humanity was quietly transforming itself from a species under observation into a species that could act with purpose and intelligence on a planetary scale. The alien ships remained near Earth, moving silently in orbit, projecting power that humans could feel but not yet challenge. Their presence was constant, a reminder that the galaxy expected obedience. But humans had begun to see this presence, not as a sign of inevitable defeat, but as a test, a challenge that could be met with cleverness, courage, and unity. Each day brought more coordination, more communication, and more understanding of the potential that lay within humanity itself. As months passed, the aliens noticed something that surprised them. Despite their enormous advantage, humanity did not crumble. Humans did not beg for mercy or surrender. Instead, they worked together, studied the alien movements, and quietly prepared. Patterns that had once been invisible began to emerge. Scientists and engineers discovered ways to predict movements, to anticipate signals, and to simulate potential responses. Communities had transformed into small networks of collaboration. Humanity was beginning to learn not just how to survive, but how to respond to an enemy that seemed unbeatable. By the end of this phase, the galaxy had been forced to reconsider its assumptions. Humans were not the simple, fragile species they had expected. They were resourceful, united, and adaptive in ways that could not be measured in technology or numbers alone. Fear had become focus. Observation had become planning. Alien control had become the first challenge in a long story of resistance. The first contact had started with lights in the sky, signals that could not be decoded, and the silent assumption that humans would comply. But humans had proven, even in these early days, that they could not be predicted or controlled. From small experiments in laboratories to quiet community collaborations across cities and nations, humanity was already beginning to fight back in ways that were subtle, invisible, and profoundly powerful. What the galaxy still did not realize was that the lesson humanity was learning how to work together, how to adapt, and how to stand against an unknown force was only the beginning. The first lessons of unity, courage, and creativity would prepare humans for the next stage of resistance, a stage that no species in the galaxy had ever imagined. And though the aliens remained confident, they were already facing something far more formidable than they could see. The human spirit, quietly growing stronger with every challenge it faced. By the time the first year of alien observation passed, humanity had changed forever. People were no longer passive observers of the sky, but active participants in a struggle that was shaping their future. They had learned that fear could be transformed into courage, that isolation could be overcome by collaboration, and that, even a species considered weak by the galaxy, could find strength in unity and determination. This was the beginning of the human response. The aliens had come expecting easy compliance, but they would not get it. Humanity was quietly preparing to show that even a small blue planet could teach the galaxy a lesson about courage, creativity, and the power of standing together. And the lesson was only just vague. As the alien ships hovered silently in orbit, humanity began to understand that fear alone would not protect them. People had spent months watching, studying, and trying to make sense of what they were facing. Now, it was clear that if they were to survive, they had to act together. For the first time in history, the world started to move with a quiet shared purpose. It was not driven by leaders alone, or by governments, or even by armies. It was driven by ordinary people who realized that the safety of the planet depended on each of them doing their part. Scientists and engineers formed global teams, connecting across continents through encrypted networks. Their goal was simple but ambitious: understand the aliens, learn their weaknesses, and create ways to protect humanity. It was not about attacking, not yet, but about preparation and strategy. Every discovery mattered. A small shift in energy readings, an unusual pattern in the signals, or a strange movement in orbit could become the key to survival. The world had become a giant laboratory, and humans were learning faster than ever before. Ordinary people also became part of the effort. Communities that once competed now shared resources and information. Farmers offered their land for testing experimental devices. Students learned code and engineering to help scientists with data analysis. Teachers adapted classrooms to train young people in observation, strategy, and problem solving. Even in remote villages, people became eyes on the sky, recording movements, noting patterns, and sending information to central networks. Humanity was no longer fragmented. It was slowly becoming a single, coordinated organism. One of the most remarkable changes was in the way humans began thinking creatively. The alien ships had never faced a species like this. They were used to worlds that obeyed, species that panicked, and civilizations that surrendered when challenged. But humans were unpredictable. They experimented constantly, looking for solutions that the aliens could not anticipate. Engineers modified civilian drones to perform reconnaissance missions. Students in universities created simulations of alien behavior. Ordinary citizens tinkered with radios, satellites, and even old, abandoned technologies to see how they could interfere or observed the alien ships. Each small experiment brought new understanding, new hope, and new possibilities. The aliens, for the first time, began to notice that their expectations were wrong. They had assumed humans would be chaotic, slow, and obedient. Instead, they saw careful planning, coordination, and adaptation. Every action humans took seemed to grow in sophistication, as if they were learning faster than the aliens had ever expected. What began as simple observation of Earth had become a true test of human intelligence and spirit. Communication between humans became more sophisticated too. Secret networks were created to share discoveries and coordinate efforts. Scientists in different countries could communicate instantly, passing information about alien signals, ship movements, and technological findings. Communities on Earth began holding meetings to plan logistics, share observations, and practice drills. Even small actions, like sharing maps of sightings or patterns in energy readings, became part of a larger strategy. Humanity was beginning to act as one species rather than as divided nations. And the aliens had no way to fully understand the depth of this cooperation in cities around the world. People adapted their everyday lives to contribute to this new mission. Factory workers repurposed machines to create small experimental devices. Teachers encouraged students to observe carefully and think critically. Families learned together, watching the sky and recording anomalies. It was not just science. It was a culture of curiosity and action spreading across the globe. Fear had transformed into determination, and determination into creativity. The first small victories, though unnoticed by the wider world, were significant. Humans began predicting certain movements of the alien ships, noting patterns that suggested intelligence, but also limitations. They discovered subtle flaws in the alien technology, small moments when energy pulses faltered or communication signals lagged. While no one could challenge the ships directly yet, the knowledge gave humanity confidence. They were no longer passive observers. They were learners, adapters, and problem solvers, quietly preparing for the day when they could act. Ordinary courage also became visible. Volunteers risked their safety to collect data or test new devices. Scientists spent long nights with little rest, running experiments that often failed, but sometimes revealed crucial information. Engineers repaired old technology to fit new purposes. Even children contributed, noticing patterns adults missed, asking questions that led to new discoveries, and reminding everyone that curiosity could be a powerful weapon. The world was alive with a quiet, determined energy at the same time. The alien ships remained a constant presence, silent but imposing. Their mere existence was a reminder of the stakes, of the power humans faced, and of the danger of failure. Yet, humans were no longer passive in the face of fear. They were learning to use it, to channel it into observation, experimentation, and collaboration. The threat that had once seemed impossible now became a challenge that humans were increasingly capable of meeting. What truly changed, however, was the sense of shared responsibility. No one could solve the problem alone. Scientists, engineers, ordinary citizens, students, and teachers all became part of a single effort. In homes, schools, and workplaces, people asked the same questions. What can I do? How can I contribute? Even those who had once felt powerless found ways to help. The world was no longer divided by nations or politics, but united by survival and purpose. Humans began developing strategies that were subtle but effective. They created observation posts, built hidden communication networks, and tested devices to monitor alien movements. Every failure was a lesson, and every success, no matter how small, built confidence. People learned to anticipate alien patterns, to detect signals, and to respond quickly. They experimented in ways the aliens could not predict, combining creativity, intuition, and teamwork. It was not a war yet, but it was preparation for something far greater. As months passed, the aliens began to notice unexpected behavior. Humans were not acting chaotically or irrationally. They were cooperating, thinking strategically, and learning quickly. The very species the aliens had considered weak and disorganized was now showing a capacity for coordination and problem-solving that surprised them. For the first time, they realized that humans were not so easily predicted. They had underestimated the combination of curiosity, creativity, and collaboration that defined humanity. In small ways, humans began to test boundaries. They launched reconnaissance drones, mapped the movements of alien ships, and experimented with technologies that might interfere with alien signals. They learned to work quietly and secretly, always staying one step ahead in their planning. The aliens saw activity, but could not fully understand it. Humans were becoming unpredictable, and unpredictability was dangerous to the council that had assumed dominance. Even with all these challenges, humanity remained compassionate and careful. The goal was not destruction, but survival. People avoided unnecessary risk, focused on learning, and planned methodically. There was a sense of responsibility, not just to their own families or countries, but to the entire species. Humanity was no longer thinking as isolated individuals or nations, but as one collective, united by the threat above and the desire to protect Earth. By the end of this period, humanity had changed in profound ways. People had learned to observe carefully, to act strategically, and to work together. Scientists, engineers, and ordinary citizens had discovered that fear could be transformed into action, and curiosity into strength. Communities had begun functioning like small networks of collaboration, sharing knowledge and supporting one another. The world was quietly united, and no one had realized how much humans had grown in just a short time. The aliens, still confident in their superiority, were beginning to feel unease. Humans were unpredictable, organized, and capable of learning. What had been expected to be an easy task of control was slowly becoming a challenge. Humans had proven that even under observation, under pressure, they could adapt, innovate, and collaborate. The lesson the galaxy had assumed it would teach Earth had, in fact, begun to teach humans instead. This was the moment when humanity realized its own potential. The small experiments, quiet collaborations, and subtle strategies had revealed something extraordinary. They were capable of much more than anyone, including themselves, had ever imagined. They were not passive, they were not weak, and they were not alone in their ability to act. They were ready to take the next step, to move from observation and preparation to action. And in that quiet determination, the first sparks of human resistance were born. The aliens had come expecting submission. Instead, they found a species learning, adapting, and quietly preparing to show that even a small, fragile planet could stand against the vastness of the galaxy. The first seeds of hope had been planted, and the growth would be unstoppable. The time for observation and preparation had passed. Humanity had learned to watch, to plan, and to coordinate. Now it was time to act. People across the globe understood that they could not remain passive forever. They had discovered patterns in the alien ships' movements, subtle weaknesses in their technology, and moments when communication signals faltered. The information was incomplete, but it was enough to attempt the first steps of resistance. Courage, ingenuity, and careful planning became the tools of the day. In secret locations around the world, teams of engineers, scientists, and volunteers worked tirelessly. They modified drones, repurposed old satellites, and tested experimental devices. Every small device, every improvised system, was designed to gather information or subtly disrupt the alien operations. No one sought direct confrontation. The goal was observation and precision. Even a small success could change the game. Humans were learning that cleverness could be more powerful than raw strength, and creativity could outsmart technology that had seemed invincible. The first operation was simple but daring. A small group of human pilots, using newly modified aircraft, approached one of the alien drones hovering silently above a remote desert. The pilots had no weapons powerful enough to destroy it, but they didn't need to. They used careful coordination, timing, and improvisation to interfere with the drone's sensors. The result was immediate. The drone faltered, lost connection briefly, and dropped a small part of its equipment. It was a tiny victory, almost invisible to the rest of the world, but monumental for those who executed it. For the first time, humanity had shown that the alien presence could be challenged. News of the success traveled quickly through secret channels. Teams across continents celebrated quietly, knowing that one small success could inspire countless others. Scientists analyzed the event, finding ways to replicate it and improve strategies. Engineers refined their designs, and volunteers prepared to contribute wherever they could. The world had shifted. Humans were no longer just observers. They were active participants in a struggle that required focus, intelligence, and courage. The aliens, for the first time, noticed an unexpected pattern. Humans were not acting out of panic or desperation. They were thinking, learning, and adapting. One of the council members, who had been confident of Earth's obedience, expressed concern. "They are unpredictable," the alien whispered to others, a rare moment of uncertainty in their otherwise confident tone. It was the first recognition that humans were capable of cleverness, strategy, and resistance. Encouraged by their first success, humans began to expand their operations. Observation posts were increased, drones were launched with greater precision, and data from all over the world was collected and analyzed in real time. Teams experimented with ways to jam signals without detection, and communication networks were strengthened. Every small improvement added to a growing understanding of the alien systems. People who had once felt powerless now realized their actions could influence the future of the entire planet. At the same time, ordinary courage became visible in unexpected ways. Volunteers watched skies for hours, often risking exposure to collect crucial information. Engineers and scientists slept for only a few hours, running experiments and analyzing results around the clock. Children, curious and brave, noticed patterns adults missed and asked questions that led to new insights. Across cities, towns, and villages, ordinary people became heroes without anyone knowing their names. Humanity's strength was not in numbers alone. It was in the willingness of every individual to contribute, to risk, and to care. The first messages sent to the aliens were subtle but powerful. Instead of anger or threats, humans used their small victories to communicate a simple truth: Earth would not be controlled. The signals were precise, showing intelligence and coordination rather than aggression. The message was clear. Humans were aware, prepared, and capable of responding. The aliens, who had expected fear and obedience, were taken aback. They had assumed submission, but instead found defiance quiet, intelligent, and carefully planned. In some cities, human teams worked around the clock to improve their technology. Satellites were modified to send encrypted signals. Drones were equipped with new sensors, and old computers were repurposed to analyze alien data. Every small experiment built confidence, and every successful operation revealed new opportunities. People began to understand that intelligence, creativity, and collaboration could challenge even the most advanced technology. Humans had discovered their own power, and it was growing quickly. The alien ships remained a constant presence, but humanity's new approach was changing the balance. Instead of being overwhelmed by fear, humans were observing, learning, and planning. They had discovered that the aliens had patterns, weaknesses, and predictable behaviors. It was not a total advantage, but it was enough to give humans hope. Courage, strategy, and adaptability became humanity's most valuable tools. Ordinary acts of bravery also contributed. People in remote areas volunteered to watch skies and record every movement of alien ships. Engineers worked in makeshift laboratories to create devices that could measure signals or interfere with communications. Scientists studied alien technology from every angle, theorizing ways to counter it without causing direct destruction. The world had become a network of intelligence, observation, and planning. Every small action mattered, and every individual had a role to play. The aliens noticed the change, but they could not fully understand it. Humans were not predictable. Their creativity, collaboration, and ingenuity made every move uncertain. The Council, once confident of Earth's compliance, grew concerned. They had assumed fear would be enough to control humans, but it was clear that humanity was learning, adapting, and preparing for something greater. Every small victory by humans forced the aliens to reconsider their assumptions. For humanity, the lesson was simple. Direct confrontation was dangerous, but clever action could achieve results. They had learned to act with precision, to anticipate alien behavior, and to use intelligence rather than brute force. Even small successes were celebrated because they represented hope, courage, and proof that humans could influence their own fate. The realization that they were capable of resistance sparked determination across the globe. Families, teachers, and communities became part of the effort in ways that were subtle but important. Children learned observation skills, problem solving, and teamwork. Adults adapted their daily routines to contribute to experiments, data collection, or communication. Communities shared knowledge, resources, and strategies, creating a network that no alien could fully track. Humanity was no longer a collection of individuals or nations. It had become a single, coordinated force ready to respond to the threat above. The first human countermove had changed the game. The aliens, who had assumed Earth would submit, now faced a species that could learn, adapt, and act. Humanity had discovered that courage, intelligence, and collaboration could overcome fear, challenge advanced technology, and shift the balance. It was a moment of awakening, a realization that even in the face of overwhelming odds, humans could influence their own destiny. As weeks passed, the operations grew more coordinated. Humans conducted multiple small missions simultaneously, gathering data, testing strategies, and refining devices. Every failure was a lesson, and every success inspired further action. The planet had become a single organism, moving in quiet. Intelligent harmony against a presence that had assumed control was guaranteed. Humanity had begun to show the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. By the end of this phase, humans had changed again. They were no longer simply observers or learners. They were actors, participants, and quiet resistors. They had discovered the power of courage, intelligence, and cooperation. Every individual, from scientist to student to volunteer, had contributed to a growing understanding of the alien presence and how to respond. Humanity had begun to prove that even a small species on a small planet could take action that mattered. The aliens, still confident in their technology and power, had begun to realize that humans were dangerous in ways they had never expected. The first counter-move was small, but it represented a monumental shift. The species they had assumed would comply had learned, adapted, and acted with precision and courage. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were not weak, predictable, or fragile. Humanity's lesson had begun, and it would only grow stronger with time. And so, the stage was set. Humans had taken the first step from observation and preparation to action. They had learned to act carefully, intelligently, and creatively. Every small mission, every experiment, and every act of courage was building towards something greater, a moment when the galaxy would realize that humanity could not be controlled, underestimated, or ignored. This was only the beginning of a story that would become legend, and humanity was ready to continue the fight. Humanity had learned to observe, plan, and take small actions against the alien presence. But now, months into this unprecedented challenge, the people of Earth realized it was time for something bigger. The aliens had assumed that humans were predictable, slow to act, and incapable of coordinated responses. They were wrong. Humans had grown clever, patient, and united. Every experiment, every observation, every small victory had prepared them for a moment when intelligence, creativity, and courage could combine to change the game entirely. The turning point began with careful planning. Scientists and engineers across the globe worked in secret, developing strategies that used human ingenuity rather than brute force. They analyzed alien movements and signals, looking for subtle weaknesses, patterns, or delays that could be exploited. Communication networks were strengthened, connecting researchers, volunteers, and observers worldwide. What had once been isolated acts of bravery became part of a coordinated plan on a scale never seen before in human history. One key strategy was timing. Humans learned that alien ships operated in precise cycles, following predictable energy pulses and communication intervals. By carefully tracking these cycles, they could anticipate movements and act at the exact moment when the ships were least prepared. It required patience, attention to detail, and absolute coordination. Volunteers watched the skies from remote locations, relaying observations to central hubs where scientists processed the data. Engineers then translated that information into actionable plans for drones, satellites, and small experimental devices. Small victories had taught humans that even limited technology could create significant results if used intelligently. Drones were modified to record alien activity. Signal jammers were tested to briefly disrupt communications, and experimental devices were deployed to observe how alien systems responded. Every action was studied and refined. Each success, no matter how minor, was a building block for the larger plan that humanity was preparing. The real challenge, however, was coordination on a planetary scale. Humans had never worked together like this before. Different countries, cultures, and languages had to communicate, share resources, and make decisions quickly. It was not easy. Governments initially resisted the idea of open cooperation, fearing exposure or misunderstanding. But people on the ground, ordinary citizens, refused to wait. Engineers, scientists, and volunteers created informal networks that connected people across continents. Knowledge flowed freely, instructions were shared, and collective intelligence grew. Humanity was slowly becoming a single organism, capable of acting with unprecedented precision and speed. The first phase of the major plan focused on observation and disruption. Humans knew they could not destroy the alien ships. They lacked the firepower for that. Instead, they aimed to confuse, delay, and learn. They deployed drones in synchronized patterns, creating false signals to test alien reactions. Satellites were repurposed to mimic energy pulses, forcing the aliens to respond to imagined threats. These actions revealed more weaknesses and patterns, giving humans insight into how the ships were controlled and where their systems were vulnerable. Meanwhile, courage and determination were everywhere, in ways small and large. Volunteers worked in harsh conditions, often risking exposure to capture more data. Engineers stayed awake for days, fine-tuning devices, running simulations, and refining plans. Teachers encouraged students to think critically, observe carefully, and participate wherever possible. Even children noticed small patterns, reporting anomalies that adults had overlooked. Humanity's strength was not in power alone, but in the willingness of every individual to contribute, learn, and act. As humans gathered more intelligence, the time came for the first coordinated strike. Not a strike of destruction, but a strike of intelligence. Using their newly collected data, human teams synchronized drones, satellites, and communication jammers to create confusion among alien ships. Signals were intercepted, movements disrupted, and key systems temporarily disabled. For the first time, humans had forced alien technology to falter not destroyed, but rendered ineffective for a critical moment. It was a major psychological victory. The aliens were shocked. They had assumed that no species could challenge their control with such precision and coordination. For the first time, they realized that humans were not only intelligent, but also capable of creativity and improvisation under pressure. The council convened urgently, discussing how to respond. Yet even as they debated, humans continued to adapt, learn, and refine their strategies. The gap between expectation and reality was growing, and the aliens were losing their confidence in what they had assumed would be a simple exercise in dominance. Inspired by the success, humans escalated their efforts. Small teams were deployed to test more sophisticated devices, capable of temporarily interfering with alien communication and control systems. Coordinated efforts took place simultaneously across multiple continents. Teams in remote locations worked together with engineers in urban centers, connected through encrypted networks. Every small success added to the growing momentum. Humans were not only observing and reacting, they were setting the pace, dictating how the aliens would respond. At the same time, human society continued to transform. Communities that had been isolated or indifferent began to see themselves as part of a larger mission. Ordinary citizens contributed in small ways, often unnoticed but essential. Farmers, construction workers, and delivery teams all found ways to support observation, transportation of devices, or communication networks. Knowledge sharing became a culture, spreading faster than any fear or doubt. People learned that cooperation, creativity, and courage could overcome challenges that had seemed insurmountable. One of the most important lessons humans had learned was improvisation. Alien technology was advanced, but it was not perfect. Humans had discovered subtle vulnerabilities and developed ways to exploit them using creativity and adaptability. Devices were modified mid-operation, strategies were changed in real time, and teams adjusted instantly to new information. The ability to think quickly, adapt, and respond intelligently became a weapon in itself, something the aliens could not fully anticipate or counter. As the operations progressed, humans began to take bolder steps. Observation drones were sent into close proximity to alien ships, collecting information about control systems and energy flows. Satellites simulated false targets, forcing alien vessels to react and revealing further weaknesses. Engineers developed small-scale jamming devices, capable of briefly interfering with signals that controlled the ship's movements. These actions required precise timing, skill, and coordination. But the results were clear. Alien control was not absolute, and humans had found a way to influence it. Even as the aliens began to adapt, humanity continued to innovate. New strategies were devised, incorporating lessons learned from each operation. Information flowed quickly through global networks, allowing teams to respond to changes in real time. Ordinary citizens continued to play vital roles, from recording observations to supporting logistics. Every contribution, no matter how small, was part of a larger, coordinated effort. Humans were learning faster than the aliens could adapt, and the gap between expectation and reality continued to grow. By now, humanity had entered a new phase. Fear had been replaced by focus, confusion by strategy, and isolation by unity. People everywhere understood that their collective actions could influence the future of the planet. Even the smallest success, such as temporarily disabling a system or confusing alien sensors, was a reminder of human capability and resilience. Courage and intelligence had become the most powerful tools available to humanity. The aliens, facing unexpected resistance, began to doubt their assumptions. They had expected Earth to be weak, slow, and compliant. Instead, they found a species that could learn, adapt, and act with precision and coordination. Every small disruption by humans forced them to reconsider control methods and analyze strategies they had never needed to question before. The first major lessons of human resilience had been delivered. The turning point was clear. Humanity could not be controlled or underestimated. Every step, from observation to careful experimentation to coordinated disruption, had built confidence, skill, and momentum. The planet that had once seemed fragile, isolated, and vulnerable was now a center of innovation, strategy, and unity. Humans had learned that intelligence, creativity, and courage could influence forces far beyond their world. By the end of this phase, the first major turning point had been achieved. Humans had not destroyed alien ships, but they had forced them to falter, adapt, and rethink. They had proven that clever planning, courage, and global cooperation could challenge even the most advanced technology. Humanity had learned its power and was ready to continue the fight, moving from small successes to greater victories that would leave the galaxy stunned. By the time humanity reached this stage, the world had changed in ways no one could have imagined. People who had once been passive observers of the sky had become active participants in a planetary effort. Scientists, engineers, students, volunteers, and ordinary citizens had all contributed to a global movement that combined courage, intelligence, and creativity. Humanity was no longer under the aliens' shadow. It was learning to shape its own destiny. The aliens, confident for centuries in their superiority, had finally begun to see the truth. Earth was not a simple, fragile planet. Humans were not a predictable, compliant species. With every coordinated effort, every small disruption, and every carefully planned strike, humans had demonstrated a level of strategy and resilience that even the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had not anticipated. They had been observed, underestimated, and in some ways, challenged in a way no species had ever dared. Humans had spent months preparing for this final stage. Every small success had been carefully studied and improved upon. Patterns in alien technology had been identified. Weaknesses had been documented. Communication channels had been strengthened, and networks of observers and volunteers were ready to act in unison. The goal was no longer just survival or small disruptions. It was to deliver a message to the galaxy. Humanity would not be controlled, ignored, or underestimated. The first step was intelligence. Humans needed to understand how the alien fleets operated, where their control systems were vulnerable, and how they responded to coordinated challenges. Drones were deployed to monitor alien movements closely. Satellites were repurposed to transmit false signals and gather critical data. Scientists worked tirelessly to simulate every possible scenario. Volunteers across the world became the eyes and ears of the operation, reporting patterns, anomalies, and signals that could inform future action. Humanity's collective knowledge had grown exponentially. Next came the coordination. This final phase required precise timing and collaboration on a global scale. Teams in one continent communicated with others across oceans in real time. Volunteers in remote regions relayed observations that allowed scientists to predict alien movements. Engineers developed devices capable of temporarily disrupting alien communications and navigation systems. Every single person involved understood their role, no matter how small, and the sum of these efforts created a force far greater than any individual contribution. Then came action. It began subtly, but its impact was immediate. Humans used the knowledge they had gained to interfere with alien operations strategically. Signals were jammed in precise sequences, drones moved in coordinated patterns, and small experimental devices disrupted key systems temporarily. For the first time, alien ships faltered not because of overwhelming force, but because of human intelligence, timing, and coordination. This was a new kind of victory, one that relied not on sheer power, but on the unique capabilities of human ingenuity. The galaxy observing from afar, was stunned. The aliens had assumed compliance, yet here was a species challenging them through strategy, creativity, and persistence. The council convened in emergency sessions, realizing that humans were unlike anything they had ever encountered. Even with their superior technology, they could not predict every move, adapt to every innovation, or respond to the speed at which humans learned and coordinated. The lesson had begun, and the galaxy had no choice but to pay attention. Humans, meanwhile, were not content with small victories. Each disruption was studied, refined, and improved. Observation networks were expanded to cover even the most remote regions. Volunteers took on increasingly sophisticated tasks, from analyzing energy patterns to predicting ship movements. Engineers developed new methods to test alien responses without detection. Every success, however small, built confidence and skill. Humanity was no longer reacting, it was shaping the situation on its terms. Communication became a key tool. Humans discovered ways to send signals that conveyed intelligence and coordination, not aggression. The message was clear. Earth was aware, prepared, and capable of defending itself. The aliens, who had assumed fear and obedience, were confronted with defiance, not violent, but clever, precise, and undeniable. Humanity had demonstrated that intelligence and collaboration could challenge even the most advanced power in the galaxy. Even the ordinary, everyday acts of courage played a role. Children continued to observe the skies and ask questions that led to discoveries. Volunteers risked long hours in difficult conditions to collect data. Engineers and scientists pushed themselves to the limits of endurance to test devices and simulations. Communities everywhere contributed, creating a network that no alien system could fully anticipate. It was not a war of destruction, but a war of knowledge, creativity, and persistence. Then came the moment of true impact. Using all the knowledge and preparation, humans executed their most coordinated operation yet. Satellites, drones, and communication devices worked in unison to confuse alien fleets, disrupt energy flows, and temporarily disable key systems. The alien ships, once imposing and flawless, faltered. Systems glitched, signals were intercepted, and their once predictable movements became chaotic. Humans had demonstrated that the smallest species on a small planet could exert influence over forces previously thought untouchable. The aliens were forced to recognize humanity's capabilities. The Council, once confident of Earth's compliance, realized that humans were not just clever, they were determined, adaptable, and capable of growth far beyond expectation. Every attempt to regain control was met with another clever human response. Intelligence, creativity, and courage had become weapons in themselves. The lesson was clear. The galaxy could no longer dismiss or underestimate humans. Humanity's actions were not without risk, but every risk had been calculated. Scientists, engineers, and volunteers worked together to anticipate every possible outcome. Communities around the world contributed knowledge, resources, and support. Ordinary people became part of a global movement that proved courage and intelligence could combine to overcome fear and uncertainty. The power of a united species, acting with focus and creativity, had never been more evident. As the aliens retreated to analyze the unexpected resistance, humans had a moment to reflect. The planet had changed, society had changed, and the human spirit had grown stronger. People had learned that fear could be transformed into courage, uncertainty into strategy, and observation into action. Humanity had proved that even in the face of overwhelming odds, intelligence, unity, and persistence could change the course of history. The final lesson was clear. The galaxy had assumed humans would be weak, slow, and predictable. They were wrong. Humans had demonstrated that cooperation, innovation, and courage could challenge even the most advanced civilizations. Ordinary people had become heroes, scientists had become strategists, and the entire planet had become a single, united force. Earth had delivered its message. Humanity would not be controlled, underestimated, or ignored. By the end of this phase, humanity had achieved something extraordinary. The alien fleets, once a symbol of fear and power, had been forced to falter. Humans had proven that intelligence, creativity, and courage could overcome even the most advanced technology. The galaxy had learned that Earth was not a planet to be overlooked, and that humans were a species capable of shaping their own destiny. In the quiet that followed, humans returned to their lives, changed forever. Communities remained stronger, cooperation had become natural, and curiosity had become a powerful tool. Children grew up knowing that courage, intelligence, and unity could overcome fear and challenge the impossible. Scientists, engineers, and volunteers continued to innovate, always ready for what might come next. Humanity had learned to stand together, to think creatively, and to act boldly, and so the galaxy never expected humanity to fight back. But their lesson had come swift. Humans had turned fear into action, observation into strategy, and unity into power. The story of Earth and its people had become a legend in the making, a reminder that even the smallest, seemingly fragile species could teach the universe an unforgettable lesson. The victory was not just about technology, power, or force. It was about spirit, courage, and the refusal to be underestimated. Humanity had shown that intelligence, creativity, and determination could overcome fear and challenge even the most powerful civilizations. The galaxy had learned to respect Earth and its people, and humanity had discovered the extraordinary potential within itself. This was the beginning of a new era. Humans had faced the unknown, stood against overwhelming odds, and emerged stronger, wiser, and united. The story of humanity's courage and ingenuity would be remembered for generations, a testament to the power of the human spirit and the lesson that no force, no matter how advanced, could ever fully predict or control the heart, mind, and determination of people who refuse to give up.